theory movement, Chris Rufo, as well as the former Princeton and Vanderbilt professor, Dr. Carol Swain. But first, the racism gold rush. That's the focus of tonight's first angle. Because public schools have become cesspools of far-left political thought, many parents whose views don't align and who can't afford private or parochial schools rightly feel that their children are trapped. Plus, many of those private schools are just as bad anyway, if not worse. Now, I can't tell you how many parents I run into complain about this dynamic. Well, today, former Attorney General Bill Barr delivered one of the most important speeches in recent memory on the dire state of public education in America.
The state of our public schools is becoming an absurdity that is scarcely to be believed. While an astonishing number of public schools fail to produce students proficient in basic reading and math, they spare no effort or expense in their drive to instill a radical secular belief system that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago.
Thus, the obvious question: why should we send our tax dollars to schools that end up teaching our kids to hate the country? So by choosing an aggressive secular humanist focus, which is now laced with critical race theory, teachers and administrators have created their own taxpayer-funded fiefdoms of radicalism. They think you should answer, they shouldn't answer to anyone outside their own sphere on issues like curriculum, on sports, on anything related to life at school. They want complete and total control, no questions asked. Well, parents, forget it. Be damned. We saw this during COVID, where teachers summarily dismissed parents' concerns about remote learning. Babysitters. And now, with the backdrop of COVID and the death of George Floyd, these school dictators feel like they got the wind at their backs. Many are eager to embrace critical race theory throughout their curricula across every subject and every aspect of schooling. And all this wokeness costs big bucks, invariably funneled to anti-American race hucksters. Courtesy of Judicial Watch, we learned that schools in Montgomery County, Maryland, paid nearly $500,000 on something called an anti-racism audit. And they gave it to a group called the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, which, now get this, is funded by your tax dollars via the Department of Education. Of the $19 million the group has raised since 2001, $17 million is from taxpayer-backed cash. What a scam! So in the past 4 years, these race hustlers haven't received a single private donation. So in Montgomery County, Dr. Monifa B. McKnight, and she's now the acting superintendent, claimed the anti-racist audit would, quote, examine the district's systems, practices, and policies that do not create access opportunities and equitable outcomes for every student's academic and social emotional well-being, and would analyze policies and practices that impact staff. Now, let me translate this for you. They're preparing, as are many schools across America, to bring racial propaganda into school subjects, every syllabus, and every academic award given out. They're going to hire scores of rabid anti-American ideologues, destroying what is left at this point of objective merit for students and faculty alike. So if you're white, you're de facto guilty. Now, if you're not white, you're given special status and consideration. Now, they call this diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, but it's really just plain old racism. Now, here are the types of DEI consultants and lecturers hired for the reprogramming. Meet Loyola Marymount University psychologist Sherry Atwater, recently hired by the Hermosa Beach City School District in California to lecture faculty on anti-racism.
One of the favorite things I like to do in my multicultural counseling class, first question when I walk up there is, okay, raise your hand if you're racist, right? Everyone's raised their hand that they're racist. And they're all telling the truth, but also by the end of this, lecture and discussion, you'll understand that you're telling the truth and you're also lying at the same time. And that's because we have implicit biases. So you can't tell me that you're not racist.
I like her two fingers up. Now, of course, Ms. Atwater's cliche-ridden idiocy is the product of decades of educational decay. She's just repeating what she heard in some other tedious seminar. Very deep thinking. Well, not quite, but it is dangerous. And things are just as toxic in our state universities, again, funded by the taxpayers. Last month, the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, the Board of Governors meeting, showcased a pathetic array of race-groveling buffoons.
When we teach philosophy, we teach the old dead white philosophers. And yet there's a lot of people who wrote philosophy besides those individuals.
I want to stress, I've spoken to students about this, and the absence of a diverse curriculum is the absence of affirming their humanity. Our campuses are well underway with implementing the DEI training module for students. Many of our campuses, they are including it as part of their freshman orientation, so there it would be required.
Yeah, freshman orientation. You got to get those kids early from the moment they step foot on campus, just in case their high school wasn't woke enough to set them straight about how racist America really is. The Republican majority in the Pennsylvania legislature should shut this down. Not a single taxpayer dollar, state or federal, should go toward the promotion of what is a corrosive and racist philosophy. Not in K through 12 and not in higher education.
Confronting this issue, I think, is the most urgent task for people who are concerned about religious liberty. Religious liberty is not safe in the United States as long as we have the kind of public school system we have, the forced monopoly, and the indoctrination of children into these radical, secular, progressive orthodoxies.
Now, Barr has it right, and he went on to say that the solution here is to give parents universal school choice, where their tax dollars travel with them and they get to choose where to send their kids to school. And while things are dire on college campuses, there are rays of hope. The Board of Trustees at UNC Chapel Hill struck a note for common sense yesterday by revoking a tenure offer to Hannah Nicole Jones, that creator of the widely discredited 619 Project. Of course, in response to that, the race mongers claim that the college boards of trustees are themselves racist. Well, look, it's all they have. Naturally, the Biden administration is full steam ahead with critical race theory in the schools. The U.S. Department of Education issued 2 proposed priorities last month that would direct federal grant money to projects that, quote, incorporate racially, ethnically, culturally, and linguistically diverse perspectives into teaching and learning, and projects that promote information literacy skills. Come on, this screams boondoggle. But they've poked the bear. 20 state attorneys general are fighting against these plans and oppose any government funds going to any projects that characterize the United States as irredeemably racist or founded on principles of racism, or that assign fault, blame, or bias to a particular race or to an individual because of his or her race. Folks, it's my firm belief that Democrats will rue the day that they linked arms with the Marxists on this issue. I think most suburban women who voted for the decent old Joe Biden, they didn't think this was part of the bargain. And the next time they walk into the voting booth, they're going to have a chance to strike a blow against the racial industrial complex that wants to wreck America as it robs us blind. And that's the angle. Explosive new expose by Chris Rufo reveals how teachers in Portland, Oregon are preparing students, now, not to be productive citizens, but to be revolutionaries. Rufo writes, the political education programs in Portland area districts constitute a training ground for child soldiers. This is not hyperbole. Some of the most active and violent anarchist groups in Portland are run by teenagers, and dozens of minors were arrested in last year's riots. Now, here's a glimpse of the violence that Portland's child soldiers wrought last summer. A warning, this is graphic. Kicking the victim in the head was 14. Joining me now, Chris Rufo, Manhattan Institute Senior Fellow, contributing editor at City Journal. Chris, even though Portland is about as far left as any major city can get, why should every American be concerned across the country about the indoctrination going on in the schools there?
Well, Portland area schools have adopted a new philosophy called the pedagogy of the oppressed, which was originally a Marxist theory that came from Brazil as one of their key teaching frameworks. And what you're seeing is that students are being told that they need to achieve critical consciousness about their own oppression, and then education system needs to be reoriented towards achieving liberation, achieving revolution, and you see it in every facet of the schooling. And I think what's most important and most damning is that not only were many children arrested during those riots, but actually many Portland public school teachers were arrested. And through my reporting, I've shown that some of these teachers, despite being arrested for violent riots, are still employed by the district. They've doubled and tripled down on revolutionary rhetoric, and that's exactly what they're pushing to the youngest people in our society.
Yeah, and meanwhile, if you ate a hot dog near the Capitol on January 6th, like, you could be in solitary confinement. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but you know, you're immediately suspect. All right, Chris, there's a program called Tech Smart in Portland that's, I guess, supposed to help improve literacy for students in kindergarten through 5th grade. And I want to show video that you obtained of one of the coaches teaching these students.
Justice fighters. You may have heard some things in the news about people protesting and injustices in our country. You've trained for this moment all year to fight for justice. Now is the time to show that you will fight for justice.
Chris, what does this have to do with improving literacy?
It doesn't, but what you've seen is that the bureaucracy has been totally ideologized and submerged in this ideology. And keep in mind that this teacher is speaking to elementary school students, telling them they need to become justice fighters, telling them they need to get out into the streets and fight along with the protesters in Portland. And this same teacher, according to witnesses who observed it, also engaged in essentially George Orwell's 2-minute hate program. In this public school, they allowed minority teachers to berate white teachers for 90 seconds in a kind of display of public apology for your whiteness. These are the kind of things that are happening within the institutions. I have the documents, I have the videos, and if it's not in your school district now, they're pushing to put it everywhere in the coming years.
Yeah, Chris, this was a video you say was shown to 3rd grade students at the Beaverton School District. Now, this is just outside of Portland.
One of the most freeing things that white people can do, or non-POC people, actually any human being on the planet could do right now, is to just say, of course I'm racist. What happens when I say, of course I'm racist, is what it does is it says, oh, this is not a personal or moral failing. This is not because I'm a bad person. This is not because I'm some evil, terrible being. This is because that is the structure of this society that I've been immersed in.
These 8- and 9-year-olds are being told that America is a racist country, and they're racist. Really quick, Chris, out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke with actually a woman from Iran who said that she grew up in Tehran, Iran, chanting death to America before school. And she told me that what's happening, the indoctrination of her child in Beaverton public schools, reminds her of what was happening back in Iran. They're sending up these red flares to warn us what's happening in the schools. It should terrify all Americans. And I hope that we can come together and push back.
Well, none of these people should be employed as teachers, period. They should all lose their jobs, will they? Chris, thank you. Coming up, from coast to coast, parents are rising up against critical race theory that is infecting their kids' schools. First, we're going to expose the toxic curricula being taught. Then, we're going to hear from parents who are fighting back. Don't go away. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Mr. Markowitz, 8th grade algebra. Mrs. Kowaleski's 11th grade Russian. Ms. Joba, Spanish. Mr. Vartuli, chemistry. Mrs. Martin, oh, she was great, human physiology. Mr. Bucas, he taught government. These were just some of the outstanding teachers I had while in the public schools in Glastonbury, Connecticut. I feel so grateful. I think a couple times a week at least, I feel so blessed to have been taught by them and to have gotten to know them. These were men and women who took their jobs very seriously. They were tough, but fair. They were rigorous, but also accessible. Middle-class families like mine made up, I think, the most of the student body. The rich kids, but they had, for the most part, no reason to go to private schools, since the public schools were so great. The town's Board of Education back then was pretty responsive to the concerns of tax-paying parents, and the PTA was well run and generally very well respected. I don't recall ever hearing my teachers talk about politics, let alone pushing their opinions on us. Boy, have things changed. Today, led by radicals running the NEA and the AFT, too many teachers either don't want to be in the classroom at all, or when they are in the classroom, they're advancing poisonous views about our founding, our history, and traditional family values. Increasingly, critical race theory infects not only the teaching of American history, but the core disciplines, even math and science, and how they're taught. More parents are coming to recognize that this far-left ideology is itself racist. And I'll say it again, is itself racist, as it maintains that all white people are guilty, privileged, and harbor unconscious bias at the very least. Now, even if you don't have children in public schools, this should matter to you. Your tax dollars keep the lights on and the teachers paid. We spend on average nearly, I think, $13,000 per pupil in the public school system annually. That's according to the Census Bureau. But most busy parents, they don't know that they're also paying the salaries of school board members like insufferable left-wing blowhard and Falls Church school board member Philip Reitinger.
I feel the need to help change our course and do more for diversity and inclusion. We need to fight inequality and racism with action. We need, as we are, to reform curriculum. We need to pursue, as we are, a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy for our schools that unites us and specifies further action.
The only further action needed is to run that guy off the school board. I wouldn't rely on him to change my tire, let alone change my kids' curriculum. Are you kidding? Now think about how sick this is. Children have been learning at home for now almost a year in places like Falls Church. And what these educrats obsess about is Trump and how racist and rotten America is. But where's the market for this? I don't believe there is a community anywhere in the entire country, outside of maybe Washington, D.C., New York, L.A., where the parents are saying, well, we hate this country, and we want you, teachers, to teach our kids to hate this country too. But radical teachers and consultants, they not only don't listen to parents who raise objections, they viciously attack them. Courtesy of the Daily Wire, we learned that in Loudoun County, Virginia, they actually created a blacklist, I thought you couldn't say that anymore, of parents who oppose critical race theory. Members of the anti-racist Facebook group sprang into action, listing dozens of parents, often including where they live, their employers, or their spouses' names. Avoiding these people isn't enough to stop the spread of their evil rhetoric. Again, the language of punishment is what they use. Now remember, these are the people molding your children in their formative years. Now, Hillary Holtman Lee, the former teacher at Potomac Falls High School and now a paid education consultant for the school district, is spending her time plotting against district parents. Language of punishment is what they use. Now remember, these are the people molding your children in their formative years. Now, Hillary Holtman Lee, the former teacher at Potomac Falls High School and now a paid education consultant for the school district, is spending her time plotting against district parents. Regarding the anti-CRT movement, critical race theories movement, we'd like to compile a document of all known actors and supporters. Please comment below with legal names of these individuals, area of residence, and or school board rep known accounts of social media, and any other info you feel is relevant. Every single one of these teachers and consultants should be terminated immediately. Defaming those who pay your salaries? Threatening to dox them? I have a question. Can any other employees get away with doing that to their customers? Parents have to do more than just post on social media and talk amongst themselves about all of this. They must start to form mass movements to take back our education system, Demand hearings on the state and the federal level. Don't just show up at school board meetings. Run for school board. Any school that is teaching our kids to hate America should be denied funding, period. You want to know who gets this? Ron DeSantis gets it.
Florida civics curriculum will incorporate foundational concepts with the best materials, and it will expressly exclude unsanctioned narratives. Let me be clear, there's no room in our classrooms for things like critical race theory. Teaching kids to hate their country and to hate each other is not worth 1 red cent of taxpayer money.
Bravo. Now, can you imagine if there was a public school somewhere in the country where kids were taught not to blame the South for the Civil War, or that giving women the right to vote was a mistake? Everyone would rightly demand an immediate stop to this. I know, many conservatives, now you're watching, you say, oh, just forget about the public schools, push for vouchers. I mean, we love vouchers and the fight for vouchers, but that's a mistake. Because on too many occasions, we've just picked up and left major institutions, and that just resulted in moving them further to the left. Now, case in point, conservatives are an endangered species at our universities. And look at what that's accomplished. Anyone over the age of about 35, maybe 30, they know that you can have public schools in America where people can get a good education minus the political indoctrination. We had non-ideological public schools for most of our history. Massachusetts native Horace Mann is considered the father of public education in this country. He believed that public schools were essential to preserving our republic. It was in 1841 that he wrote, "Forts, arsenals, garrisons, armies, navies are means of security and defense. But schoolhouses are the Republican line of fortifications. And if they're dismantled and dilapidated, ignorance and vice will pour in their legions through every breach." Well, the left is already far along in the dismantlement. And until we mobilize, take back these school boards, we will continue to see the vice and the ignorance pouring out. And that's the angle. Last night we shared video of Loudoun County, Virginia parents tearing into their school district for pushing critical race theory onto their kids. But what we didn't show you was that Black Lives Matter protesters showed up to shout those parents down.
If somebody disagrees with critical race theory, you're considered a racist, which is really not the case. There is no line of distinction. Either you're for it or you're against it. And if you're against it, well, then you're automatically a racist. And that's not doing society any good. None of us any good.
That's exactly what racism is.
Well, joining me now are two parents fighting against CRT in their schools. Ian Pryor, Executive Director of Fight for Our Schools, and Nikki Neely, President and Founder of Parents Defending Education. Ian, let's start with you. You spoke at that news conference. So what happened after the BLM crew? It wasn't all that big, but they showed up. What happened?
Yeah, there were about 4 of them, local BLM activists. We actually refer to them as Chardonnay Antifa out there. But right when we were about to start our press conference, you had these folks come in with their banner and actually physically occupy the space that we had set up in order to conduct the press conference. And then when the parents, and these parents are dedicated parents that have been working every day, all day, to go out there and get petitions to recall this school board. And when they started speaking, these folks, they didn't want to hear from them. All they wanted to do is disrupt, continually interrupt, harass them, and call them racist. Now, eventually we were able to get the press conference going, and then when we were done, with the exception of one individual, all the rest of them just left. They didn't take the time to talk to the press. They didn't take the time to put their views out there. All they want to do is disrupt and silence the opposition, as they say.
Now, Nikki, what do you think would have happened if you all tried that little routine with the Black Lives Matter press conference?
Oh, we would be all over the mainstream media for starters, which strangely, it's weird to find the Washington Post and a lot of these other DC-based outlets not covering this. It's just a total mystery to me.
Yeah, well, Democrat candidates for Virginia Lieutenant Governor debated last night, and even they did touch on critical race theory, specifically York County. Sean Perryman said critical race theory is not even being taught in our schools. It's a Republican dog whistle, meaning racist, where anything they disagree with is critical race theory. Ian, Is that true? So they claim it's not even present. It's not even a factor.
That's absolutely nonsense. We have actually invoices from the Equity Collaborative in California to Loudoun County Public Schools in Virginia, where they say teaching teachers and coaching teachers on critical race theory. Right. They talk about culturally responsive learning. Well, you don't have to spend too much time on the Google machine to put culturally responsive learning in and critical race theory to understand that culturally responsive learning is the educational tool to implement critical race theory concepts. They are trying to gaslight people. They realize that they're on the losing end of this debate, and they're trying to explain. And you know what the saying is, when you're explaining, you're losing. And we're certainly feeling momentum out in Loudoun County. We've got hundreds of parents that are committed to recalling this school board and giving kids an education in things like math, science, reading, typical things that you want your kids to learn to be able to succeed in life.
Yeah, well, Nikki, Washington Post columnist Christine Emba, she's out there defending critical race theory, saying calls for racial accountability can feel like an attack when you're not ready to acknowledge your behavior, that of your ancestors has harmed others. So, Nikki, that's what our children apparently should be steeped in, is especially if they came from other countries, which many of the families from Loudoun County are from other countries, nothing to do with slavery, nothing to do with, they weren't even in this country. But they're supposed to be steeped in all of this to learn what? That America's an awful, rotten, racist country. How's that educating our kids?
Of course. I mean, we're supposed to be paying for the sins of our fathers. I mean, my grandparents were put in an internment camp, yet I'm not chasing after a bunch of white people because, you know what, I mean, we can't keep blaming everybody else for what's going on. Certainly we can teach American history better, but we should not be trying to shame and degrade children, particularly at a time when mental health in children who have been out of school in many parts of the country for, coming on 15 months at this point, to tell them that they're bad people because of the color of their skin, because of immutable characteristics, is sick. It's emotional abuse. And that's why we see people around the country standing up, just like Ian's doing, just like other people around the rest of the country are doing. It takes
guts. Yeah, it takes guts, both of you. It takes courage. And you're being on the show tonight, and you're doing what you're doing every day on this issue. You're inspiring people across the country, and this movement is growing, and we're going to keep covering it. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Well, that message from Corey Yeshua to his daughter, Royalty, is something every parent should agree on. Now, he's just one of many parents across the country speaking out against critical race theory and the damage it's doing to our kids in school. Corey Yeshua joins me now. Corey, thanks for being with us. Why is it so important for you to talk about this issue with your young daughter?
Well, it goes toward the youth, it goes toward young people. I want my daughter to treat people with respect, no matter if they're black, white, yellow, brown. Like I said in the video, I want people to know that people should be judged by their character and not by their color.
There was a moment today on television when Eugene Robinson of the Washington Post, he made a point about critical race theory. Watch. Corey, is this a rejection? Is this rejection of critical race theory, as he said, a right-wing only issue in your view?
No, absolutely not. I think that anybody who doesn't have in their mind that they want people to be judged, by just your race or your color or your creed, nationality, I think that goes through all spectrums, liberal, Democrat, right, left, it doesn't matter.
Well, then some schools in the Washington, D.C. area, Corey, they're actually having these race polls or surveys. Some consulting group gets paid a lot of money to come in and tell everybody how racist they are, even if they don't think they are. Of course they are. And so the white kids have to separate into one group, and then the black kids, the people of color, separate into another group, and they have to do different workshops. And the white kids have to do the workshop where they apologize and examine their racism. What about that approach to teaching and education?
Why are we going backwards in America? Are we trying to go back to Jim Crow? We're going back to segregation. We need to be moving forward. We need to be teaching people there's no difference between you if you're white or black. Why is that so hard for some of these people that are implementing these things in schools? I don't understand. It's so racist. It is so racist.
Well, the point they're making is America is systemically racist to her core, And because America is systemically racist, everything has to be taught through that lens to prevent further corrosion of our country.
Well, Frederick Douglass said that the Constitution is a glorious liberty document. And I believe the same thing. And if, you know, Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King believed that we were systemically racist and there was no way that we could change, then I don't think that they would have fought as hard as they did to change. They knew we had something called the Constitution, right? And it's for liberty of all men, right? And all races and all creeds. So,
Corey,
yeah, man,
yeah, Corey, this interview is going to be seen by a lot of people, but your viral video was awesome. Thank you so much for joining.